Looks so stupid, though. Wait, I have an idea. That'll work. Man, I love Death Battle! Death Battle is so fun and cool. I like all the funny numbers. I like it when one guy just kills the other. I like it when Boomstick just goes like... It's so cool! I mean, with how much better the second season was from the first, I mean, surely this has got to be the best season ever, right? Now, let me repeat that. Surely, this has got to be the best season ever! Are you ready? Last time I ranked and reviewed Season 2, I would know I died. It was a huge jump in quality for Death Battle and gave it much more and much deserved notoriety. So of course, let's keep the ball rolling for the next year. So what did Season 3 bring to the table? It makes it look easy. Yeah, spoilers, things aren't gonna be as pretty this time. Sure, Season 2 in any circumstance is a hard act to follow, but come on, it's not downhill from here. Surely it can't be that bad, right? Well, you'll see. Hey, here's a reminder of the rules. Animation matters most, verdict doesn't usually matter, and it's all my opinion. And you can expect me to bend the rules here and there if it's relevant. I gotta go through this song and dance like 5 more times. Hell yeah! Let's get this over with. Beware of the pipeline, fellas. Season 1's worst episode was offensive. Season 2's worst episode was boring in an aggravating kind of way. And Season 3's worst episode is... just depressing. Mewtwo vs. Shadow had just about everything going for it to be a pretty decent episode. I like both characters and all, but man, this is one of the most baffling end products this show has on its name. Anyone who's a fan of the show will know exactly what I'm talking about, so let's rip the band-aid off right away. The way they treat Shadow in this episode is... not as bad as everyone makes it out to be. That's not a spicy hot take for the sake of it. I was honestly surprised revisiting it because I've seen and heard so many takes like, man, this episode is just non-stop making fun of Shadow. Oh man, they hate him. There's nothing good they say. And I just wonder if I even saw the same episode. They call Shadow a cocky dick and excessively overconfident in his abilities, which, I mean, is kind of pushing it, but I mean, that's not invalid per se. I mean, who was it that coined the term ultimate life form again? They make fun of his amnesia too, which I mean, fine, I guess. And they also call his title game the worst game ever, which, depending on who you ask, is either very true or very not true, but I don't care either way. So no, I don't think this is some kind of anti-Shadow propaganda that everyone makes it out to be. In fact, I think it's kind of over-exaggerated to a point. But then the fight happened.
What's your problem, freak?
I know not its name, but it is black.
Racism!
Nice, okay.
Yes. Bigotry.
There's just no other way to say it. They write Shadow like a moron. All he does is scream random nonsense like a cartoon villain and gets smacked around like a toddler. There's no cool dynamic or interplay with any of his abilities. Hell, he's not even given so much of a chance to do cool things. Hell, even if he does, it stops abruptly just so Taka can keep ham-fisting his performance in. On that note, apparently Taka was given the direction to voice Shadow intentionally bad to match the tone of his Sonic Adventure 2 performance. It's especially dumb when you see that Mewtwo isn't treated as poorly. The worst he really gets is a generic sex joke in his analysis because, of course, he's genderless. We just have to make it about sex. We just have to. Hell, even if Mewtwo was given Yang levels of celebration and hype, I wouldn't mind because that would at least allow potential for anybody to shine here. It's like, what? 2 seconds of action total, and the majority of the fight is them just standing around and talking. It's so painfully boring. It's got some similar parallels to Starscream vs. Rainbow Dash in that regard, which, okay, yeah, I mean, I still kind of like the episode overall, but number 9 out of 25 might have pushed it a bit. And when it's not boring or blatantly bastardizing Shadow's character, we get other little dumb things like this hand-drawn Mewtwo barely looking like him, and half a background being a green screen. Okay, is there anything I can call good in this entire 14-minute episode? I like Shadow's sprite rigging. The custom track that Brandon Yates made for the episode is good. You know, a 1 out of 10 still has quality. Oh boy, more horny time, yay! Okay, that's not entirely fair since Cammy vs. Stonia's wankery was dialed way back in comparison to the other seasons whenever someone with a double X chromosome was involved. But that doesn't mean it's good. They used up all their good material in the last season, so now I feel like I have to walk on eggshells whenever I listen to Boomstick give off funny innuendos about how he wants to dip his fry in their frosty or something, I don't know. And what little there is to work with, guess what? It was already done before, so who cares? Other than that, there's nothing to the analysis except for Dronya. I gotta hand it to him. That is, in fact, a drone and a ya, but I wouldn't put an episode this low on the list just for that alone. Let's talk about the fight, and oh my god. I'm gonna be honest here. This is one of the worst looking sprite fights in Death Battle history. Worse than the overly saturated Naruto vs. Ichigo, worse than those awkward 3D but not quite 3D inserts in Metal Sonic vs. Zero. Hell, I think a lot of Season 1 sprite fights look better than this, since Ben at least knew his limitations back then and didn't risk doing more complex animations at the risk of them looking worse than they'd be worth, and that it's at least unique. Usually I don't mind it whenever sprites have more complex movements, but when it gets to a point where the pixels are more prominent than whatever they're representing, it takes me right the hell out of there. That's probably also due to it being a Street Fighter vs. Mortal Kombat episode, where those two sprite styles clash like hell itself. Even with the other SF vs. MK episodes, they have the excuse of either being really early in the show, having an environment distinct enough to make it more visually engaging, or just using different sprites. All my brain sees is pixels, with those hilarious pixelized JPEG PNG things inserted like that. It's just bad. A lot of the animations too feel off to me. Like this beginning right here, whenever they move, I feel like I can see the actual keyframes they use and point them out in real time. And these three shots back to back to back give me immense pain, in the most joyous kind of way though. Now I wouldn't be so hard on the animation's visuals if the fight itself had anything worth a fuck in it. The death's cool, and it actually made me feel bad for Cammy with how much shit she gets as well as her screaming sound effects. But then she says, "No!" and waves her arms like a child, so yeah, thanks. I know this is Luis's first animation, and he would go on to be one of Death Battle's greatest animators of all time, and I'm really glad he got to stay on the show to improve not just the show's quality, but his own on top of that. I just cannot stand his first outing though. It's aged terribly. It was a close call between this and Mewtwo vs. Shadow at the bottom. I do think this fight is visually worse, but I can at least call this a fight and not them standing around and talking so much while blatantly making fun of one of the combatants at that. This is the third ranking in a row where the race for the bottom is fierce. Why does this keep happening? Something I want to do for future rankings is try to pinpoint what I consider the biggest disappointment of each season. I think it's pretty interesting to think about because it feels like every season has at least one episode that should have been really, really good, but fell short enough of greatness. Bowser vs. Ganon would probably be my pick for season 3, and if I can pinpoint a single episode in this season to call it that, then that's really funny and sad. I mean, they're the two big bad Nintendo video game villains. Of course you have to fight at some point, so of course I like very little about this episode. The fight is, I'll give them this, it is mostly boring. Ganon's represented like ass. I can excuse it for when Zelda and Fox were represented in their Smash iterations, since the latter has an interesting moveset and the former is at least accurate to the original series. But Ganon is infamously represented in Smash like Captain Falcon, and it's most of what he does in the fight, especially when they bring up all sorts of goofy shit that he can do and have him do like 2 of those things. They also tried to do a brief little haha, Bowser thought he was dead because he's stupid like that kind of thing, and it made Ganon do a little JoJo thing, and I just don't really care about that bit entirely, especially when it's not even the only time they do it. The tennis segment is godlike, and it actually fits both characters and is also the primary reason I didn't even consider this to be in the bottom 2 spots, so nice. Oh, but then after that, Bowser doesn't even get to do anything. He gets like 2 fake outs when dipped in the lava, one of which led to his clown car and it getting rendered obsolete immediately, and the other instance led to Giant Bowser, and while it had some pretty nicely animated moments, Ganon though for some reason had his Link to the Past version. It just doesn't look good. You can tell these sprites were not made to be animated in a scenario like this. And when it's all said and done, Bowser does a funny Vor thing and Dry Bowser just explodes. It's an okay-ish fight, all things considered, but here's what puts it near the bottom of the list. This is one of the messiest handlings of both characters' feats I've seen on this show so far. Neither character is given many consistent feats to go off of. What with saying Bowser can survive a supernova and getting sucked into a black hole multiple times, only the conclusion to have this fucking feat be his main failing. They even try to convince us that this is probably more deadly than this, like, no. Hell, they even say he can survive as a skeleton in the analysis, but no, one thud on the ground will do him in. It's such a weird interpretation on what I can only really consider as an anti-feat. You can just say his feats were inconsistent, and that would have been a lot better rather than overly analyzing an E for everyone Mario game on the DS. Oh, and Ganondorf's too. They say in his rundown that he can be slain normally and is specifically vulnerable to holy weapons, but then in the conclusion, they say he can only be killed by holy weapons. I'm losing my mind. Other than that, everything else is just, it's whatever. I mean, they made a turtle penis joke work pretty well. Yeah! After the amount of controversial episodes Death Battle had last season, you would think that it'd be better, right? Well, I mean, yes, but oh boy. I don't think Tracer vs. Scout is on the same league as Goku vs. Superman, the Squeakwool, or Yang vs. Tifa in that aspect, but oh man, all I hear about this episode is that either it sucks or it's okay. Now, I don't know too much about Overwatch or TF2. I have been into each game for a little bit, but never really gotten too invested in either lore, so my knowledge is very limited. Then again, I don't think game knowledge is a requirement to say that this episode is literally just the Tracer show. There's not a whole lot of fuckery in the analysis. In fact, it was very bog standard with little humor, and apparently they misinterpreted a lot of Scout's kit, but again, I don't really know or care that much. But the fight is honestly kind of pitiful. Scout doesn't get to do anything here. His speed and parkour abilities are very sparsely showcased. There's a moment where Tracer planted a bomb on his feet, and rather than like, you know, running away from it, he felt the need to make a quirky comment, but hey, I guess we needed that sick drink reveal and more time to stand around and talk a bunch. Scout does get some cool moments, but all he gets is this pretty cool shot of him strutting through Tracer's bullets and a bat combo that sends Tracer flying. That's it. Meanwhile, Tracer, oh, you know, maybe I'll be Tracer. She clowns on Scout the entire time, does a bunch of flippy-dippy teleport shit, and spams the fuck out of her abilities throughout the entire fight, despite her accelerator actually having limits, but that was only a problem once apparently. And even then, she just unfucks herself immediately, so pretty cool, really. And the funny thing is, looking through this fight again, she doesn't even land that many hits either. Other than the bomb that didn't even mean anything, the first hit Tracer lands in the entire animation is this ending combo right here that charges her ult. And you know, I get that it's because these two are glass cannons in their own universes, so landing a ton of hits isn't something that you can communicate well with either of them, but all that really means is the fight is just 90% dodging bullets and 10% dear god no. All of this is made just a little bit more sus when you consider that this was released not even 4 months after Overwatch came out. I mean, I do like the previously mentioned runway walk, the voice performances are great, the use of Anarchy Reign's music is nice, but there is actually one main reason I decided to be merciful and not put this episode lower. Remember in Season 2 and early Season 3 where Torian was able to pump out many fight animations at mostly consistent quality every other episode? Yeah, well, get this, Torian's not superhuman or anything like that. In those old Road to 100 vlogs Ben used to make, he talked about how those early Torian fights overworked him and how it reminded Ben of his own tight production schedules for Season 1. Even though Tracer vs. Scout's release was already slated, Ben was aware that he would be toning down the episode, but felt it was necessary so Torian could catch a break, and then after that, lighten the load for future 3D fights. I still do not like how this episode turned out in the grand scheme of things, but ultimately, I can say that it was a very good call for Torian's sake, and I'm happy that he was still able to do his thing with a much more generous schedule. I don't even have a quirky comment for that. That's just cool. I think now's a good time to mention that this is probably the most difficult ranking to narrow down so far. Now you might be thinking, wait, most of the difficulty came down to the positive aspects and we're only so far on the list. What gives? Well, that's because most of the season is actually mediocre, so really most of my ranking was decided via dartboard, at least comparatively. I'll go more into that when it's all done, but for now, hey, remember Flash vs. Quicksilver? Because I sure didn't. At least the analysis sections are actually pretty good, Quicksilver's especially. It had a lot of good jokes like Boomstick's Dune Buggy, and the two generally take jabs at each other throughout, and it's pretty funny. Although I have to say, this is in fact the first episode that had the Boomstick dad joke. Basically, they talk about a character's relationship with their dad, only for Boomstick to be like, oh man, woe is me, just like my dad. Hey, wait, why are you leaving? Honestly, I can give this one a pass since it is the first one and it led to Wiz taking a jab at him immediately. It's only noticeable here because of the absolute volume of future Boomstick dad jokes in later seasons. I guess on the topic of Wiz and Boomstick talking, I also just like how they blatantly discuss how Flash just fucks Quicksilver, and it's just really funny to me. Figured I'd bring it up now because this fight, man, I don't know. Okay, there are good things, at least after some bystander gets run over by Captain fucking America. Like the idea of it taking place in less than a second, even though that also means that these birds and this tornado are also moving at light speed. I don't know. But anyways, I like that, and the Speed Force section itself is pretty tense for what it is. But man, almost nothing happens. I mean, these speed sections are good, arguably better than something like Wally vs. Sonic, since we have an idea of how they scale to the environment, and how the animations are more than just red and blue streaks moving quick. But that's like the bulk of the animation. You know what, actually, let's play a game real quick. God damn it! Aside from how ironically hilarious the delivery is, what do you think Quicksilver's reacting to here? Is it A, Flash blitzing him really badly? B, Raiden somehow performing dimensional travel to interact in the fight? Or C, birds? Now, my dear viewer, if you think the answer is B, you're fucking stupid. The answer is birds. Because if you're gonna have a fight between Flash and Quicksilver, dear God, don't forget the birds! Also, the death sucks. In spite of how cool the Speed Force section is, Flash doing the actual blitzing feels kind of repetitive, and the way Quicksilver actually dies is... Of course, it's just like the birds. You gotta have Quicksilver died by a random samurai statue, so thank you, Barry Allen. Ooh boy, we're at part 2 of the, wow, this matchup sure exists, doesn't it, section of the ranking, and I'm so excited. Hey, yeah, so, wow, Amy Rose versus Ramona Flowers sure does exist, doesn't it? The analysis had some funny bits of visual humor and back and forth between Wiz and Boomstick, but nothing spectacular or anything. The only other observation I have is that they use Sonic Chronicles as a source of anything, and that's really the best bit of comedy right there. Anyways, the fight is such a mixed bag. I feel like for everything I do like, I can name at least one thing I either dislike or just don't care about. I mean, I like that the fight takes place in one of the levels of the Scott Pilgrim game, but it's also got some little visual things I don't care for, like the overuse of motion blur and the incessant camera shaking. I like some of the choreography in the fight, but there's also a lot of these slow-mo bits that are just too common and break the pace rather than complementing it. I like how expressive Ramona is, but I don't like most of Amy's expressions having these mouth sprites that are just a different pixel size than the overall sprite. They do this, honestly, more often than you think in future episodes, and I just never liked how it looked. I like the choice of Toho music. It's got that bump and energy that keeps me engaged, but the sound effects are just so damn loud and abrasive that it makes the audio mixing pretty bad at points. I would say the first half of the animation is good overall. It's got some fun hammer combat and then make use of the environment well, and for the most part, everything's fluid and keeps your attention throughout most of it. But after they get into the purse dimension, the animation tanks hard. Most of the shots are just confusing, like the clones kick Amy's ass for a sec, and then she suddenly gets angry and all the clones are raining down. Like, how did that happen? Amy destroying the purse takes way longer than it should, and then she summons a tornado and Ramona just stands there and lets herself get hit. Amy awkwardly jumps in between the cabinets, Ramona gets hit, and eventually she dies. It's an okay death, really. Like, the whole animation goes from being awkward in a silly but fun kind of way in the beginning to just awkward in a bad and poorly paced kind of way at the end. Also, they do the thing again in the conclusion where they say Amy had the edge in every other category, and they give off feats that completely eclipse Ramona's, so I can definitely say once and for all that yes, this was in fact an Amy Rose versus Ramona Flowers. Moving on now. There's a lot of promise and hype behind a good season finale. You want it to be some sort of grand high-stakes matchup, and even if that doesn't happen, then comes the task to make the content feel more grand in scale. Very rarely do they fumble the season finale in that aspect. The first exception is Deadpool vs. Pinkie Pie. Now, I get why it's the finale. Originally, that spot was going to go to Lara Croft versus Nathan Drake, but they pushed it back for Torian's sake, like I mentioned previously. And don't get me wrong, this is definitely finale-worthy, I feel. But it just missed the mark in a lot of areas. For one, yeah, it's another Deadpool episode, so more funny, quirky, funny, fourth wall breaking. Deadpool vs. Deathstroke at least spaces out Deadpool's fuckery, so he doesn't overwhelm the analysis with his funny memes. That's not quite the case here, sadly, and he comes off a lot more smug and braggy with his abilities too. It's just not as interesting to watch. That said though, my new most wanted death battle matchup is Prep Time Wiz versus Prep Time Batman. Make it happen. Pinkie's analysis was actually a lot more tolerable, mainly because I just really like the editing. At first I didn't even notice that Pinkie's flash model was replaced with a sprite, and they make it work pretty naturally. Even so much that inserting in on a clean plate where Twilight and Spike react to the sprite, it's really well done. Also, Wiz's breakdown over Toon Force and trying to shoo Pinkie Pie off by telling her she has a visitor soon, and directly connecting the analysis into the fight, it's nice. On the note of the fight, it starts off all decent and shit. We get a nice few fourth wall breaks in the split screen and some cool shots during the action, but of course, given the two combatants, we gotta get nice and wacky. Them interacting with other fights would be really cool. Shame they don't really interact all that much. Deadpool throws Cap's shield back, he and Pinkie do a small dancey thing, and Pinkie just comments on Amy and Ramona destroying the cabinets. I like the idea of this, but the idea is all we get. We don't really get to see how these different fights are impacted by Deadpool and Pinkie Pie being there, and even if we do, it just happens. We also get them interacting with Ben, Chad, and Nick themselves. It's fine. Nick even gets a good jab at Deadpool, and then it's over. I do like how Wiz says that he and Boomstick are the losers, but other than that, wow, that was just fine. I did place this above the other episodes because at least I actually remember it in a mostly positive way. The matchup makes it stand out from the other pool of okay-ish to fuck shit episodes, and that is just dandy. Well, at least I can say we're now in the episodes I can confidently say I like overall. This truly is a hellish society we live in. I remember being disappointed with Joker vs. Sweet Tooth at first because I wanted Joker vs. Green Goblin instead. Yeah, gobble these nuts, bitch, you'll come around. Ben apparently also considered Kefka as an opponent, but honestly, maybe they should have done so if it meant a DC character lost to a non-Marvel opponent at least once in this hell timeline. The analysis had some funny jokes and the music helped complement how morbid both characters can be, but it's alright all things considered. The fight though is pretty much why this episode is good to begin with. I think it's kind of weird how the first part mostly focuses on Batman's tech, but the chase scene is fun enough and the premise is also goofy enough to where I can kind of just shut that part out of my mind. The first part was Death Race before Death Race was a thing, and considering that's exactly what the previous episode attempted, it's really funny how this is the matchup that gets it right. Though we do get the fabled DBX truck, so never mind. Everything after, meanwhile, better uses the dynamic of both their tactics. Element of surprise versus bloodlust. I guess on that note, it does feel like another case of one combatant featuring the other rather than versus. Granted, there's not a lot you can do to make Sweet Tooth's drive to murder, and more murder with a dash of ice cream compete against Joker's goofy, yet sadistic personality and being able to pick apart Sweet Tooth's fighting style to find the one opportunity to take advantage of it. But I don't really care. Joker taunting Needles to run him over, to everything that happens in the ice cream truck. See, look at that face. He's having fun, goddammit! I think the Joker making a quirky comment over the mech works 10 times better than most attempts Deadpool has ever made on the show. Now that's funny. I get that a lot of hardcore Twisted Metal fans are convinced that Needles was able to be taken advantage of so easily, and, you know, I guess that's fair, but I think it kind of works because of Joker's intellectual advantage over Sweet Tooth anyway. And plus, the death is honestly really amazing. Needles gets exposed to the Joker venom, and he laughs as the orchestral music swells up and the screen distorts to fuck, with Joker's face there too. It's one of the most haunting deaths, and one of the most unique, since it's different than just hitting someone really hard. The fact you can hear so much audio heckery throughout, and the only thing you hear by the end is Joker's laugh, and that's really good. Then the cop car phases through the grass bed. One last joke to end the fight with. I'm impressed. Ken vs. Terry was practically on the cusp of being a great episode for me, but it falls just short, and the analysis is mostly to blame here. Most of the jokes were fine, I just don't really like how they handled the feet section. They give Terry some pretty nutty stuff. I don't really have a problem with that, but what was going on with Ken's? Wow, he was able to punch a dude in the air, beat Bison with help, and is fast enough to dodge attacks from one of the most powerful Street Fighter characters? Sure. They also said that Terry fought a dude that can catch bullets, but not before plugging Ryu vs. Scorpion earlier, where in that episode they say Ryu can dodge point-blank fire. Who Ken should scale to? Also, Boomstick feels the need to make a Captain Planet reference whenever they bring up, like, any element. And while I appreciate the bit of lore that Boomstick's a Captain Planet fan, the quantity of them made in future episodes and with how unnecessary they are, it's basically a diet Boomstick dad joke, and now that I think of it like that, I can do without. So yeah, the analysis was kind of cringe, but man, that fight more than makes up for it. It's another case of just two dudes scrapping it out, but I really like how it escalates. With how at first they're just fighting for the heck of it, but over time their clashes destroy the dojo and it gets too dangerous to be around. It stays true to both Ken and Terry's conviction to win. I really like it. And they both get to shine in their own rights, like Terry breakdancing out of the way of Ken's attack, Terry's combo in response to getting his wee-wee singed, and Ken's Shinryuken feels very meaty and impactful. They do more detailed close-ups for their most powerful attacks, but they feel deserved here to help sell the impact of them, on top of them being the only close-ups in the fight. Sprite's fights do them way more often later on, and they can be neat some of the time, but I do kind of miss them when they just have less of them to feel more deserved, you know? In spite of how fun the fight is, I really don't care about the end. As much as I appreciate them taking a moment to breathe, I wish it was better implemented. Mainly Terry getting exhausted at the same time as Ken. The explosion from Terry's power wave has too long of a delay, and all it really does to Ken is give him a few paper cuts. And then Terry just kills him immediately.
So, on the bright side, this means Eliza's single now, right? That's right, Boomstick.
If I'm going to keep trying to come up with a disappointment of each season, then I may as well do the inverse. It's one thing to be excited for a matchup, only for the episode to not turn out so hot, but it feels really good to look at a match that I don't really care for in the slightest to actually turn out pretty great. Zoro vs. Erza is a good contender for the surprise of Season 3, because I'm not much of an anime guy, and One Piece and Fairy Tail are notorious for their length, so I couldn't really get a good grasp of either character to really be invested. Fortunately, Death Battle did a very good job of giving me the very basic rundown of both these characters, and is it really worth asking for more? I also appreciate that Boomstick can keep his Wendy's fry in his pants for even a little bit. So yeah, the analysis is pretty good, but the fight is the most surprisingly great part about the episode. I wasn't even expecting anything bad per se, I just didn't think I'd be so invested. It's a simple setup, but not a bad one by any means. Zoro's lost his shit, and turns out he has a bounty that Erza is looking for. Great, no overcomplicating things, just using both their experiences to justify the meeting. It's another case of character with all the arsenals ever made versus the guy who can only do like 2 things total fight, but I always like those kinds of fights. Sometimes it's good to have them since they're not too plain to where it can feel like they're doing the same thing over and over, but not too overwhelming to where it's hard to keep track of everything. And there's plenty of time to fit regular swordplay and various levels of destruction in between, rather than gradually, yet linearly, going through Erza's armors and weapons in order of strength or whatever. The ending's also really good. Erza mocks Zoro's recklessness at the cost of his life, only to get up and scold her for not being able to finish off someone that she considers a fool. I also really love how they play into the whole strength comes from friendship trope by having Zoro be like, yeah bitch, it's not just you. Fighting for one's friends is a silly little idea, all things considered, but I love seeing it done right more than anything else. And it and leads to one of the best one-stroke duels in the whole series. They both hop towards each other on swords, and the actual clash ends with the silhouette of Erza getting cut in half and a whole mountain behind it getting cut too. It's such a cool artistic decision that sells just how strong Zoro is, and thank fuck Boomstick didn't make a quirky sex comment about Erza getting split in two. Honestly, I'd have bumped this episode down a couple spots on that alone. Whoa, 2 season rankings in a row where the top whatever are all Torian fights. Oh my god, that's so crazy. That's so revolutionary. That's so wacky. Oh my god. So, Ratchet and Clank versus Jack and Daxter, right? You ever have something that you like for reasons that aren't because of anything you can pick apart or analyze, more so just because it's a fun experience? Yeah, that's how I feel here, and a fancy way of saying that I don't actually have an awful lot to say about this episode in comparison to the others. Analysis is pretty fine, but the animation is just so vibrant and nice looking, and both duos throw out so many gadgets and guns and other fun fuck shit at each other where, yes, it's chaotic and honestly a little hard to keep track of, but that's why it's so cool! All the voice performances are solid, and the use of Tekken 7's Jungle Outpost fits the fight so well. And for some reason they use it again for Ken vs. Terry, but hey, not that I can complain. It's a really good track you can fit in most fights and have it work about as well as each other. I also really love how the Rhino 5 is used more as a set piece rather than a weapon, along with 1812 Overture in the background to further accentuate the frantic nature of the conclusion. And not once in the entire animation does it feel like it's obvious who's gonna win. This fight is basically the junk food of Death Battle in all honesty. The only thing you're really gonna get out of it is a fun experience, and the bright colors and fancy guns keep you coming back. You know, kinda like how Twizzlers pack in cherry licorice and an Uzi. It has been gate-kept out of the top 3, mainly because those episodes have a bit more going on with them, and really the fight is just so much laughably better than everything else this episode has, to where in my mind in this goofy ranking video is almost a detriment. C'est la vie. When I was trying to decide my top 3 favorite Season 2 episodes, my original plan was to just not even rank them at first, because they're all on such a similar plane of quality. I figured I'd just let the video reflect my process by just talking about them first, and then come up with a temporary ranking to further exemplify how back and forth it was. I obviously decided to nix it since it made an already long video even longer, and to be honest, it's kinda unfair and silly for me to expect my audience to interpret how I rank things at any given moment, and boy am I glad I did, because my dumbass would have had to do it all over again for this ranking. I know this is a long-winded way of saying, so once again, my top 3 was hard as fuck to narrow down, and once again, it's possible that my order will flip and flop after it's done. But I don't know, I thought it was a neat little fun fact for ya. Hulk vs. Doomsday. Analysis is good. It has some funny jokes like actually basing a calculation on a daddy abuse thing, and going over how Bertrand just fucking sucks. Though in all honesty, in spite of how much I like the more detailed conclusion and how it signifies the back and forth nature when deciding the fight, basing the entire result on what amounts to, hell, damn near headcanon territory is kinda silly, not gonna lie, Wiz. Anyway, so the fight, oh my god. So you have fights like Thanos vs. Darkseid, Beerus vs. Galaxia, hell, Hulk vs. Broly, where they do a lot of cosmic scale destruction, and yeah, sure, it's nice to look at, and yeah, sure, I do like those episodes. Most of those episodes, but what they don't have that Hulk vs. Doomsday does is, well, actually feeling destructive. The tricky thing about animating a planet getting blown up is that we have no sense of scale or reference to how they actually size up to feel impactful enough. Unless you work for goddamn NASA, chances are you've never actually been near another planet to relate to the scale. Now, Hulk vs. Doomsday, I mean, do you have eyes and ears? All the crunchy sound effects and the 800 bits of debris per shot flying everywhere as these two big meaty men pummel each other while power metal music from Metal Gear Rising and Guilty Gear blare in your ears. Purely on an auditory level, you know exactly what this fight is about. And if that weren't enough, moments like Doomsday throwing a bus at Hulk and straight up drop kicking through it, and Hulk using the police car as boxing gloves, and oh my god, the final act. Doomsday penetrating Hulk with his Doomsday impaling Hulk with... No, that still doesn't work. He does this, one by one, as Hulk slowly falls to the floor, and Doomsday gives one last rapid punch barrage, green blood everywhere, and the last thing Hulk sees and hears is Doomsday says his name and rips his head off! It is among the best deaths in the entire show, full stop. Hell, I have no qualms in saying that Hulk vs. Doomsday is almost on the level of Wolverine vs. Raiden in terms of just how awesome batshit insane combat, so why isn't this number 1? Well, time to nitpick, and if I have one thing to say that this episode falls falls short on that Wolverine versus Raiden didn't, it's that right up until the very end of the fight, it really doesn't take as much advantage of Hulk or Doomsday as you might think. Honestly, for most of the fight, you could replace either of them with some other big, large, muscular, pulsating, sweaty man from the showers of Ram Ranch, with big, hard, throbbing cowboy cock wanting to be sucked. I forgot what I was talking about. Also, there's a few other little goofy moments like the rainbow-colored silhouettes, a man's head still being intact despite getting crushed, and even though the drop kicking through a bus is awesome, Hulk's reaction is literally just, oh, but yeah, awesome episode. And like I said, it came down to the microscopic wire with these ones. Good God. Earlier, I said Zoro vs. Erzo was a good contender for the surprise of the season, and that was mainly because I didn't think it would be such a good episode on rewatch. The only reason I'm not 100% sure on that is because it has to compete with Meta vs. Carolina for that title, which turned out to be a fantastic episode. Now, this is really cute. ScrewAttack joined with RoosterTeeth about a year prior, so it's not a surprise that a fight that officially features both their characters was gonna happen, but never would I have guessed that they would basically write a Red vs. Blue episode. I've mentioned that Death Battle doesn't dick around with its formula too often, and it's good that they don't, but when I brought that up, it was for Deadpool vs. Deathstroke. And while yes, it is different, it's pretty much your average everyday episode, but with a third host. And while I guess you can say the same about this episode, since it still follows the formula of character rundowns, fight, and conclusion, just with a little more story, what instead happens are new cutaway gags where they basically abuse Griff the entire time. It's simple, it doesn't overstay its welcome, has funny dialogue, and the inherent comedy of ragdoll physics. I can look at this forever. These are also pretty much the best cutaways in the show's history. Yeah, there are a few good ones from Mario vs. Sonic onwards, but other than those select few, most of the cutaways are either pretty okay, have boringly predictable punchlines, talk about Elon Musk for a minute, farts, or are just pointless. We also get a good little bit of lore at the end that connects both universes that suggests that Sarge is Boomstick's dad, and everyone is aware of the fact except for Boomstick. Surely this will lead to some amazing character moments for Boomstick in the future, and surely Sarge will remember this moment for years to come. I'm gonna be honest, the analysis and lore building for both shows is the primary reason why this episode is so high up. Not that the fight is bad or even average. It's got very nice choreography, steady escalation of Carolina using all her weapons just to say fuck it, use everything at the end, and leading to the phenomenal time stop scene. There's like next to no jank even, and it conveys Carolina and Church's relationship and Meta's imposing, almost monstrous fighting style pretty well. All of it is backed by the amazing custom track Slingshot with a kick-ass chorus and adapting pretty well in the fight. And while the death is kinda silly since I don't personally believe Meta would take so long to hesitate on killing Carolina, it's still neat in concept, and the final line at least calls back to the first exchange in a neat way, so I can't be too bothered. It's a really good fight, I just don't have that much to say on it really. The analysis is what makes it stand out so much for me. Very rarely, if at all, do we have an in-universe reason for a death battle to happen, and I really like that, as well as it not being done more often since it makes this episode stand out more. It's really good, but falls just short behind. Yeah, to say that this season peaked with its premiere is unfortunate, but not very surprising. If Ratchet and Clank vs. Jak and Daxter is the junk food of Death Battle, then Dante vs. Bayonetta has gotta be if that junk food was made into a whole ass cake. Definitely not healthy for you, but you can tell they had fun making it. The analysis is fine and dandy. Dante's had some good jokes, Bayonetta's had some jokes, it's good and shit. Then again, do you really watch this episode just to hear Boomstick say Beyblade or Climax? Don't answer that, but you know where I'm going next. Sure, the fight has aged a bit with funny jank and the fact that Dante had the Yamato, but good god, holy shit, there's so much action that they can't even help but start before the fight graphic even shows up. Hell, while Ratchet vs. Jak is on my mind, yeah, they both have a lot in common. They both have a lot of fun weapons, with sick music in the back, both feature teamwork, clearly a lot of connections. If they run out of ideas, my email's on my bio. However, for everything Ratchet vs. Jak does well, Dante vs. Bayo does it pretty much better. Aside from the weapons being more varied with tons more animation potential, there's way more going on. I love the characterization of these two, where Dante gets to show off his no fucks given strategy of just letting him get hit and brute forcing his way out, along with gloating and goofing around just to have some fun. And Bayonetta's playful yet sarcastic and sadistic nature is also demonstrated well, and her agility made for some really cool shots. She even does a leg thingy like Nero does in Devil May Cry 4 because yeah, they better put that in! I love how both of them mix their time stop abilities, and how the visuals mix grayscale and purple glowy effects, not only to represent how their time stops interact, but also for looking cool. They did not have to include Trish and John into the mix either, but it allowed for even more fun choreography. And I love how they don't even strictly target their directly connected opponents. They mix it up every now and again, and it's just so freaking cool. And it all culminates to a finale where Trish and John, bitch, that, and Dante and Bayo throw out their strongest forms and moves. And they don't even make it clear who's gonna win right until the very end where Dante just kills her. Like, obliterates her, kill her. Dear God. The fight was pure eye candy through and through. And even though I get why they don't do 6-minute fights packed with passion-filled content all for the fuck of it, I mean, I still kind of miss it, you know? But easily, the most influential part of Dante vs. Bayonetta is that it served as a catalyst for their brand new show, DBX. And that was Death Battle Season 3. Yep, it sure was. Ben Singer said in those Road to 100 blogs that he thinks Season 3 is his personal favorite because of the technical step-up. And, you know, I don't want to judge him for that, or anyone else that happens to really like this season. But if there's anything else I can also pull from those blogs, is that Ben also said that Season 3 had growing pains. And man, is there ever a more apt way of putting it. Yes, the research, writing, and animation values are a step up. I'm not going to disagree. But that can only take you so far. Season 2 is so beloved because of all the passion and all the amazingly awesome moments and fight scenes that anyone can point out on the street. And sure, it seemed like Season 3 was gonna go down that route again, but that's not really what happened. I hate to put it like this, but they played it safe for the season. And trust me, I get it, but that just means it won't do well in retrospect. It's also sad when all of Season 2's good episodes are more than the entire episode count of this season. And I have no shame in admitting that Season 3's worst episodes are way worse than Season 2's worst episodes. And while we're at it comparing seasons, let's go back to Season 1 too. Yes, it's aged worse than Milk on the Sun, but what makes it worth revisiting is that it just oozes charm. Plus, it was the first season, meaning that it had the inherent advantage of having nothing to follow up on. Season 1 is technically the worst season, but I think Season 3 is the least good season. And funny enough, that paints the latter in a worse picture for me. Most of Season 1's worst episode at least have that early death battle crust, to where you can spin that misery into fun riffing potential. The only exception is what I call the fuck you episode, and it's significantly worse than any episode I will ever rank the bottom spot in these future rankings. But really, that episode was such a low bar that it's almost not even worth discussing. I sure shit don't know why I keep bringing it up. It really sucks that I have to end this video on such a dour note, but I mean, hey, after that last season, it was gonna take a dip in quality at some point. Plus, hey, Season 3 being the least good season means that there's nowhere to go but up from here on out. And that is the most positive thing I can say about this video. That's funny. Hey, hi, I'm here to make a jarring cut for a good reason, I swear. I was gonna end with the usual, thanks for watching, see you guys next time for the Season 4 ranking, die on camera, you know, usual flair. However, one day after brainstorming topics I wanted to do after I plan on getting the Death Battle rankings done, I had an epiphany. I don't have to do all these back to back. I'm not burnt out on them. I just have other videos I really want to do, and I don't want to feel like I have to rush the remaining Death Battle rankings and they end up not as good as they should be because of it, you know? I'm sorry if you were really looking forward to seeing those rankings as soon as possible. Don't worry, I'm still gonna do them. But at the end of the day, I'm just some funky, stupid gamer dude on YouTube, and video games are my main interest. To any new viewers or subscribers that found me through the Death Battle rankings, I mean, hey, thanks a bunch for sticking around, and I hope you like what's in store for later. Whatever I decide to be in store for later. And who knows, maybe I might still do some or even all of them back to back still. I don't know. I did want to do all of them last year, and look where we're at now. Anyways, that's gonna be it from me. Take care, and I will see you guys in the next video, whatever that may be. And don't worry, I'll still get the Season 4 ranking done before 2056. Mark my words.